I'm Emily, 32, a mom who thought family meant everything. Last summer, my kids, Ava and Lucas, were banned from my sister-in-law Rachel's pool. Too loud, she said her words, cutting deep in front of everyone. I stood there humiliated, thinking of my dad who taught me family sticks together. His love for swimming was my kids' joy too. Why did Rachel's judgment hurt so much? I'll share how it changed us. Have you ever felt pushed out by someone close and subscribed to hear my story? I pulled into Rachel's driveway, the kids bouncing in the back seat, their swimsuits already on. Ava clutched her inflatable unicorn, and Lucas was singing some made-up song about dolphins. I forced a smile, hoping today's barbecue would smooth things over. Maybe Rachel's words last week were just a bad moment. Family fights happen, right? I wanted to believe we could move past it. The sun was blazing, and the smell of grilled burgers drifted from her backyard. I grabbed the potato salad I'd made and ushered the kids out. Rachel's house was perfect as always. Her lawn was manicured, the patio furniture gleaming, and her pool sparkled like something from a magazine. I could already hear cousins splashing, their laughter echoing. Ava's eyes lit up and she tugged my hand. "Can we swim now, Mom?" she asked, her voice full of hope. I hesitated, glancing at the pool gate. Rachel hadn't mentioned lifting the ban, but surely she wouldn't say no in front of everyone. I spotted Rachel by the grill flipping burgers with that tight smile she always wore when she was in control. She looked up, her eyes locking on Ava and Lucas. I waved, trying to keep things light. "Hey, smells amazing," I called, holding up the salad. She nodded, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. I felt a prickle of unease, like I was walking into something I hadn't prepared for. The kids ran toward the pool, but Rachel stepped forward, her voice sharp. "Ava, Lucas, no swimming today," she said, loud enough for the whole yard to hear. My stomach dropped. Ava froze, her unicorn float slipping to the grass. "Why not?" she asked, her voice small. Rachel crossed her arms. "House rules," she said. "You know why." I felt every pair of eyes on us, cousins, uncles, even the neighbors Rachel always invited to show off. I stepped closer, keeping my voice steady. "Rachel, can we talk about this?" I asked. "I mean, it's a barbecue. The kids are excited." She sighed, like I was exhausting her. "Emily, I've made it clear. Your kids are too much for my pool. They don't listen." My face burned. Too much. Ava and Lucas were just kids, loud and messy like any others. I glanced at Brian, Rachel's husband, hoping he'd step in. He was flipping hot dogs, his back to us, pretending he hadn't heard. I wanted to argue, to point out that her daughter Sophie was splashing just as loudly with the other cousins, but then I saw Sophie by the pool, whispering to her friend Lily. She smirked, her eyes on Ava, and I caught the words, "screams too much." My heart sank. Sophie was 9, old enough to know better, but young enough to mimic her mom's tone. Ava didn't hear, thank God, but I felt like I'd been slapped. Was this what Rachel was teaching her? To look down on my kids? I knelt beside Ava, picking up her float. "Let's get some food first, okay?" I said, my voice tighter than I wanted. She nodded, but her shoulders slumped. Lucas was already distracted chasing a butterfly, but Ava's disappointment clung to me. I led them to the food table, trying to shake the feeling that we didn't belong here. The potato salad felt like a pathetic offering, now sitting next to Rachel's fancy charcuterie board. As I scooped macaroni onto Ava's plate, I overheard Brian talking to Uncle Greg. "Rachel's just keeping things orderly," he said, his voice low. "You know how Emily's kids can be." I froze, my hand shaking on the spoon. Brian hadn't even looked at me all day, but he was backing Rachel up like this was normal. I wanted to march over and ask when my kids became the family problem. Instead, I handed Ava her plate and turned away, my chest tight. Back home that night, I tucked the kids into bed, their swimsuits still dry. Ava asked why Aunt Rachel didn't like them. I fumbled for an answer, saying grown-ups sometimes have silly rules. After they fell asleep, I sat on the couch with Nathan, my hands wrapped around a cold coffee. I told him what happened, how Rachel humiliated us, how Sophie's smirk made it worse. He leaned back, rubbing his face. Maybe just let it go, he said. Rachel's always been strict. It's her house. I stared at him, my frustration bubbling. Let it go, I said. She's singling out our kids, Nathan, and Brian's acting like we're the problem. He sighed, like I was making a mountain out of nothing. They'll get over it, he said. Kids forget. I didn't answer. He didn't get it. This wasn't just about a pool. It was about my kids being made to feel small, about me feeling like I had to apologize for them. I went to bed, the weight of the day pressing down, wondering if I was overreacting or if something deeper was breaking. I woke up the next morning with a headache, the kind that lingers like a bad memory. Nathan was already gone for work, leaving a note about picking up milk later. I stared at it, wishing he'd written something about yesterday instead. The kids were still asleep, their room quiet, except for the soft hum of Ava's unicorn nightlight. I poured coffee, replaying Rachel's words. Sophie's smirk, Brian's silence. It wasn't just the pool ban. It was the way they made my kids feel like outsiders. I decided to call Rachel. Maybe if we talked one-on-one away from the barbecue's chaos, I could understand her side. I dialed, my stomach nodding as it rang. She picked up, her voice clipped. Emily. I'm busy. What's up? I took a breath, keeping my tone calm. I just want to talk about the kids and the pool. I said, I don't get why you're so hard on them. There was a pause, then a sigh. Look, my pool's not a free-for-all, she said. I have standards. Standards? I repeated, my grip tightening on the phone. They're kids, Rachel. They splash and laugh. That's what pools are for. She cut me off. Not when they're disruptive, she said. You let them run wild and I'm not cleaning up their mess. My jaw clenched. I wanted to yell that her precious pool wasn't a museum, but I held back. Can we at least find a compromise, I asked? Let them swim with the other cousins supervised. She laughed sharp and cold. There's no compromise, Emily. My house, my rules. I hung up my hands, shaking. Her dismissal stung worse than the barbecue. She wasn't just banning my kids. She was judging me as a mom. I paced the kitchen, trying to shake the anger. Was I wrong? Were Ava and Lucas too much? I thought of Ava's careful braids, how she always shared her toys. Lucas, with his endless questions about bugs. They weren't perfect, but they were mine, and they didn't deserve this. Later, I took the kids to the park, hoping fresh air would clear my head. They ran to the swings giggling, but I couldn't relax. My phone buzzed with a text from my cousin Lisa, who'd been at the barbecue. Heard about the pool drama, she wrote. Rachel's out of line, but Brian's telling everyone you're overreacting. I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. Brian was gossiping now. I pictured him at the grill, dodging my gaze and now spinning stories to make me look dramatic. I typed a reply, then deleted it. What could I say? Lisa meant well, but her words only deepened the ache. I watched Ava push Lucas on the swing, his laughter bright against the gray cloud in my mind. I wanted to protect that joy, but Rachel's judgment was seeping into everything. At home, I dug through old boxes in the garage, needing something to anchor me. I found a photo album, one I hadn't opened in years. There we were, me and Rachel, 16, and carefree, cannonballing into a lake. Her smile was wide, no trace of the woman who'd just shut me down. I sat on the garage floor, the album open on my lap. When did we stop being friends? We used to share secrets, sneak extra popsicles, dream about our futures. Now she acted like my kids were a problem she needed to solve. The photo blurred as my eyes stung. I wasn't just mad at her. I was grieving something I couldn't name. I tucked the album away, resolving to try again. Maybe I'd write her a letter. something honest, but kind to bridge the gap. That evening, Nathan came home milk in hand like he'd promised. I told him about the call, how Rachel laughed off my compromise. He set the milk down, frowning. You're letting this eat you up, he said. Why not take the kids to the community pool instead? I shook my head. It's not about the pool, I said. It's about family. She's pushing us out. He looked away like he didn't know what to say. I wished he'd fight for us just a little. Before bed, I checked Ava's backpack for school tomorrow. Inside was a crumpled note from her teacher. Ava's been quiet lately, it read. She mentioned not being allowed at her aunt's pool. Any concerns at home? My heart sank. Ava was carrying this too, her small world bruised by Rachel's words. I sat on her bed, watching her sleep, her unicorn float tucked beside her. I had to fix this, not just for me, but for her, for Lucas, for the family I thought we were. I spent the next few days drafting that letter to Rachel, each word a tightrope between honesty and hope. I wrote about our teenage summers, how we used to laugh until our sides hurt, and how I wanted that warmth for our kids. I asked her to reconsider to let Ava and Lucas swim with their cousins. It felt like a lifeline, a way to stitch us back together. I dropped it in her mailbox on a Tuesday morning, my heart pounding as I drove away. By Friday, I hadn't heard back. I told myself she was busy, that she needed time. But then I saw her car at the coffee shop downtown, and my hope cracked. I parked, grabbed my purse, and walked in, thinking maybe we could talk face to face. Rachel was at a corner table sipping an iced latte, her phone propped up like she was in no rush. I took a breath and approached. Hey, Rachel, I said, keeping my voice soft. Did you get my letter? She looked up, her expression flat. Oh, yeah, I saw it, she said, stirring her drink. I didn't have time to respond. My stomach twisted. I sat down anyway, determined to stay calm. I just want to understand, I said. Why are you so set against my kids? They're not different from Sophie or the others. Her eyes narrowed, and she leaned forward. Emily, let's be real, she said. Your kids are spoiled. They don't respect boundaries and you don't make them. It's not my job to deal with that. I felt like I'd been punched. Spoiled Ava, who saved her allowance to buy Lucas a birthday book. Lucas, who apologized to ants he stepped on. I gripped my coffee cup, my voice low. That's not fair, Rachel, I said. You're judging them without knowing them. She shrugged like it was nothing. I'm protecting my space, she said. You'd get it if you had any sense of order. The words burned, each one a jab at my parenting, my home, my life. I stood to leave my chair, scraping the floor. I'm trying to fix this, I said, but you're making it impossible. She didn't look up, just sipped her latte. As I walked out, I felt eyes on me, the barista, and a few regulars glancing over. Small towns talk, and I knew this wouldn't stay quiet. I drove home, my hands tight on the wheel, replaying her words. Spoiled. No boundaries. Was that what everyone thought? That evening we were invited to Diane's for a family dinner. I almost said no, but Nathan insisted, saying it'd be good for the kids to see their grandma. I agreed, hoping Diane might mediate, maybe soften Rachel's stance. We arrived at her cozy, split-level house, the smell of roast chicken filling the air. Ava and Lucas ran to hug Diane, who ruffled their hair and handed them cookies. For a moment, it felt normal, like family could still be a safe place. But then Rachel walked in, Brian trailing behind with Sophie. Rachel's smile was polite, but her eyes skipped over me. Diane called us to the table, and as we passed the mashed potatoes, she started talking about Sophie's swim team. She's so disciplined, Diane said, beaming. Rachel's done wonders with her. I nodded, waiting for a mention of Ava or Lucas, maybe their soccer games or art projects. Nothing came. Diane kept praising Rachel's orderly house, her perfect pool, like it was a model for us all. I bit my lip, focusing on cutting Lucas's chicken. But then Diane turned to me, her tone shifting. "Emily, you should see Rachel's new pool filter," she said. "Keeps everything spotless. Not easy with so many kids around." Her words landed like a jab, implying my kids were the mess she meant. I looked at Nathan, hoping he'd say something, but he was focused on his plate, avoiding the tension. After dinner, I helped Diane clear the table, needing a moment to breathe. In the kitchen, I tried to talk to her. "Diane," I said, "can we discuss the pool thing? Rachel's being really hard on Ava and Lucas." She set a plate in the sink, her face tight. "Emily, Rachel's got a right to her rules," she said. "You can't expect her to bend for you." I stared, my hands full of dishes. "Bend for me," I said. "She's shutting out my kids, Diane. Your grandkids." She sighed, wiping her hands on a towel. "You're making this bigger than it is," she said. "Rachel's just trying to keep things nice." I felt a lump in my throat. Diane, of all people, was choosing Rachel's side. I thought of her warm hugs, her stories about my dad, and now this. It wasn't just Rachel anymore. It was the family I thought I had slipping away. I left Diane's kitchen, my hands still damp from the dishwater, and rejoined the family in the living room. The kids were sprawled on the carpet playing a board game with Sophie, but the air felt heavy, like everyone was tiptoeing around what wasn't being said. I sat on the couch watching Ava roll the dice, her smile forced. I wanted to scoop her up and leave, but I stayed clinging to the hope that something might shift, that Diane might see how unfair this was. Then I overheard Rachel talking to Brian by the fireplace, her voice low but sharp. "She's always been like this," Rachel said, gesturing vaguely toward me. "No structure, just chaos. That's why her kids act out." Brian nodded, murmuring something I couldn't catch. My throat tightened. Act out, Lucas was 6, obsessed with dinosaurs, and Ava spent hours drawing pictures for her teachers. They weren't chaos, they were kids. But Rachel's words painted them as something broken, and Brian's agreement made it worse. I tried to focus on the game, cheering Lucas when he landed on a treasure square, but my mind was spinning. I glanced at Diane, who was knitting in her recliner, her face calm, like she hadn't just dismissed my kid's worth. I wanted to scream, to ask why she couldn't see what Rachel was doing. Instead, I excused myself to the bathroom, needing a moment to breathe. I locked the door, leaned against the sink, and stared at my reflection. My eyes were red, my jaw tight. Was I the problem? Was I too soft? Too lenient, like Rachel said? When I came back, the kids were packing up the game, and Rachel was handing out dessert. She passed me a slice of pie without a word, her eyes cold. I took it, my fingers numb, and sat beside Nathan. He was chatting with Brian about football, acting like everything was fine. I wanted to shake him to make him see how much this hurt. But he'd already told me to let it go, and I knew he'd say it again. The next morning, I was at the grocery store pushing a cart full of cereal and apples when I ran into Karen, our neighbor from down the street. She waved her smile, too bright, and I braced myself. "Heard about the pool thing," she said, grabbing a bag of oranges. "Rachel told me your kids trashed her deck last summer. That's why she's so strict now." I stopped my cart, squeaking. "Trashed her deck?" I said, my voice sharper than I meant. "Karen, that never happened. My kids barely touched her pool last year." Karen blinked, her smile fading. "Oh well, that's what Rachel said," she mumbled, backing away. I stood there, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, my heart pounding. Rachel was lying, spreading stories to justify her ban. I thought of Ava's crumpled note from her teacher, how she'd gone quiet at school. Now I knew why. Rachel's words weren't just hurting me. They were reaching my kids, tainting how people saw them. I paid for my groceries and drove home, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. At home, I found Ava in her room, curled up on her bed with a book. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back. "Everything okay at school?" I asked, keeping my voice light. She shrugged, not looking up. Sophie said, "I'm annoying," she whispered. She told everyone I'm why we can't swim at her house. My chest ached a deep, hollow pain. I pulled Ava close, kissing her forehead. "You're not annoying," I said. "You're wonderful." But inside, I was raging. Sophie was parroting Rachel, and it was breaking my daughter's heart. I didn't tell Nathan about Karen or Ava's words that night. He was tired from work, and I was tired of his shrugs. Instead, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Rachel's lies looping in my mind. Trashed her deck. Spoiled. Chaos. Each word was a brick building a wall between me and the family I loved. I thought of my dad, how he'd sit with me by the lake telling me family was a team. But this didn't feel like a team. It felt like I was fighting alone and losing. By the weekend, I was raw, every small thing setting me off. When Lucas spilled juice on the counter, I snapped at him, then apologized, hugging him tight. I was unraveling, and I knew it. I needed to talk to Rachel again to make her see the damage she was causing. But the thought of her dismissing me again, or worse, lying to more people, made my stomach churn. I was stuck, drowning in a fight I didn't start, with no way out. I couldn't keep dodging the tension anymore. Rachel's lies. Diane's dismissal and Nathan's silence were suffocating me. I decided to call a family meeting at Diane's house, thinking if we all sat down together, we could finally clear the air. I spent the morning baking blueberry muffins, a peace offering, and rehearsing what I'd say. I wanted to be calm, to focus on Ava and Lucas, to make everyone see how this was tearing us apart. Nathan agreed to come, though he warned me not to expect much. Diane's living room was warm with the scent of coffee and my muffins, but the mood was anything but cozy. Rachel and Brian sat on the love seat, Sophie between them, her arms crossed like a miniature version of her mom. Diane was in her usual recliner knitting needles, paused in her lap. Nathan sat beside me on the couch, Ava and Lucas playing in the next room with a puzzle. I took a deep breath, my hands clasped tight. "Thanks for coming," I said. "I just want us to talk about what's been going on with the kids and the pool." Rachel's eyes flicked to me, sharp and unyielding. "What's there to talk about?" she said, her voice cool. "I've set my boundaries. End of story." I swallowed, keeping my tone even. "It's not just about boundaries, Rachel," I said. "You've been saying things about my kids like they trashed your deck. That's a lie, and it's hurting them. Ava's struggling at school because of it." Rachel's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't deny it. Brian shifted, staring at his shoes, his silence louder than words. Diane set her knitting down, her face stern. "Emily, you're blowing this out of proportion," she said. "Rachel's pool is her property. She gets to decide who uses it." My chest tightened, but I pushed forward. "This isn't about property, Diane," I said. "It's about family. You're all acting like Ava and Lucas don't belong. They're your grandkids, too." Diane's eyes softened for a split second, then hardened again. "You can't force people to see things your way," she said. "You're causing the drama here." I felt the room tilt like the ground was slipping beneath me. Causing the drama I'd spent weeks trying to fix this, swallowing my pride, writing letters, baking muffins. I looked at Nathan, desperate for backup, but he was studying the coffee table, his jaw tight. Rachel leaned forward, her voice cutting. "Let's be honest, Emily," she said. "This all started because you never respect boundaries. You let your kids do whatever they want, and you expect me to deal with the fallout. That's why they're not welcome at my pool." My breath caught her words, slicing deeper than ever. Never respect boundaries I thought of every time I'd bitten my tongue, every time I'd smiled through her jabs. I stood, my voice shaking. "You're wrong, Rachel," I said. "I've tried to meet you halfway, but you keep moving the line. You're punishing my kids for being kids, and you're lying to make it okay." The room went quiet, the only sound Sophie's puzzle pieces clicking in the next room. Rachel's face flushed, and she stood too, her hands on her hips. "Don't turn this on me," she snapped. "You're just jealous of my life, my house, my pool. You've always been like this, wanting what I have." I froze, her accusations so absurd it almost made me laugh. Jealous I didn't want her sterile house or her perfect image. I wanted my kids to feel love, to splash and laugh like I did with my dad. I opened my mouth to respond, but then I heard a small sob from the doorway. Lucas stood there. His dinosaur pajamas wrinkled his eyes wide and wet. "Why does Aunt Rachel hate us?" he asked, his voice breaking. My heart shattered. I rushed to him, kneeling to pull him close, but he was trembling, his small body rigid with hurt. "Lucas, sweetheart, she doesn't hate you," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. I glared at Rachel, waiting for her to say something, anything to fix this. She looked away, her jaw tight, and Brian just stared at the floor. I scooped Lucas up, his face buried in my shoulder, and turned to Diane. "This is what I'm talking about," I said, my voice low. "Your daughter's words are breaking my kids, and you're letting it happen." Diane's mouth opened, but no words came. I carried Lucas to the next room, where Ava was frozen, her puzzle piece dangling in her hand. She'd heard it all, too. I sat them both down, whispering that everything would be okay. But inside, I was unraveling, the weight of their pain crushing me. I held Ava and Lucas close, their small bodies pressed against me on Diane's guest room floor. Ava's puzzle piece was still clutched in her hand, and Lucas's sobs had quieted to hiccups. I whispered promises I wasn't sure I could keep, telling them they were enough, that this wasn't their fault. But my voice cracked, betraying the storm inside. I could hear muffled voices from the living room, Rachel's sharp tone cutting through, but I couldn't make out the words. I didn't want to. I stood, wiping my eyes, and led the kids back to the couch, determined to face whatever came next. Rachel was pacing now, her arms crossed, while Brian sat stiffly, his hands clasped. Diane was still in her recliner. Her knitting abandoned her face, a mix of discomfort and resolve. Nathan looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to sit and let this pass, but I couldn't. Not after Lucas's tears, not after Ava's silence. Rachel turned to me, her voice rising. "You're making a scene, Emily," she said, loud enough for the kids to hear. "This is exactly why I don't want your chaos in my life. You drag everyone into your mess." My blood boiled, but before I could speak, Diane raised a hand. "Enough, Rachel," she said. But then she turned to me, her eyes cold. "Emily, you need to stop this. You're upsetting the kids, stirring up trouble. Rachel's right. You're too emotional. Too emotional." The words hit like a slap. I'd spent my life holding this family together, planning birthday parties, calling Diane on Sundays, driving Ava to soccer, when Rachel couldn't be bothered with Sophie's practices. I looked at Diane, the woman who'd baked me cookies after my dad died, who'd promised to always be there. "You think I'm the problem?" I said, my voice trembling. "You're watching my kids get hurt and you're blaming me." Rachel scoffed, stepping closer. "Hurt," she said. "Your kids are fine. You're the one who can't handle a simple rule. You've always been like this, Emily, acting like the world owes you something." I froze, her accusation unearthing a memory I'd buried. Years ago, when I was pregnant with Ava, Rachel had snapped at me for asking to borrow her car, saying I was entitled, always needing help. I'd brushed it off then, but now it felt like a pattern, her resentment simmering all these years. I opened my mouth, but Diane cut in, her voice sharp. "Emily, you've got to let this go," she said. "You're tearing the family apart. Rachel's trying to keep her home peaceful, and you're making it about you." I stared at her, my vision blurring. Tearing the family apart, I'd been the one holding back trying to mend things while Rachel lied, and Diane looked the other way. I glanced at Nathan, desperate for him to speak, but he was staring at his hands, his silence a betrayal of its own. Then Sophie spoke, her voice small but piercing from the love seat. "Mom's right," she said, looking at Ava. "Your kids are too loud. That's why nobody wants them around." Ava's head snapped up, her eyes wide, and Lucas gripped my hand, his fingers trembling. I felt something break inside me, a raw, jagged split. My kids were being shredded in front of me, and the adults who should have protected them were piling on. I knelt beside Ava, my voice barely a whisper. "You don't listen to that," I said, my throat tight. "You're perfect." But her eyes were distant, like she was already pulling away. I stood facing Rachel, my body shaking. "You've gone too far," I said, my voice low. "You're hurting my kids, and you don't care." Rachel rolled her eyes, but I saw a flicker of something, guilt or defiance, I couldn't tell. Brian muttered something about calming down, but it was white noise. I turned to Diane, my last hope. "You're supposed to be their grandma," I said, my voice breaking. "How can you let this happen?" She looked away, her hands twisting in her lap. The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy. I felt Ava's hand slip into mine, Lucas clinging to my leg. I wanted to scream, to tear down the walls of this house, but all I could do was stand there, my heart in pieces, with nowhere left to turn. I drove home from Diane's with Ava and Lucas buckled in the back seat, their silence heavier than any words. The streetlights blurred through my tears, and Nathan's quiet sighs from the passenger seat only deepened the ache. I kept seeing Lucas's trembling hands, Ava's distant eyes, Sophie's cruel words. Rachel's accusations and Diane's betrayal had cracked something fundamental in me. I couldn't keep begging for a place in a family that pushed my kids out. I needed to build something better, something ours. The next morning, I woke before dawn, my mind racing. I slipped into the kitchen, brewed coffee, and opened my laptop. I started searching for backyard pools, scrolling through images of sparkling water and colorful tiles. It was a wild idea, expensive and daunting, but it felt right. I thought of my dad, how he'd take me to the lake every summer, teaching me to float on my back, saying water could wash away anything. I wanted that for Ava and Lucas, a place where they could laugh without judgment. I spent hours researching, jotting down notes on pool sizes, costs, and local contractors. The numbers were intimidating, $20,000, at least more than we'd ever spent on a single project. I hesitated, my pen hovering over the paper. Nathan would think I was crazy, and maybe I was. But then I found a small, folded note in my desk drawer, tucked inside an old birthday card from my dad. "Build your own joy," it read in his slanted handwriting. I'd forgotten those words written when I was pregnant with Ava, scared and unsure. They hit me now like a lifeline. I closed the laptop and went to check on the kids. Ava was coloring at the dining table, her crayons scattered, and Lucas was building a Lego tower. I sat beside them, my heart steadying. "What if we had our own pool?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Right in the backyard for you and your friends." Ava's eyes widened. "Really?" she said, her crayon pausing. Lucas clapped, his tower toppling. "Can it have a slide?" he asked. I laughed, the first real laugh in days. "Maybe," I said. "Let's dream big." That afternoon, I called Nathan at work, my nerves buzzing. I told him about the pool idea, expecting him to shut it down. "We can't afford that, Em," he said, his voice tight. "And Rachel will lose it. She'll think you're trying to one-up her." I gripped the phone, my resolve hardening. "This isn't about Rachel," I said. "It's about our kids. They deserve a place where they're wanted, He went quiet, then sighed. "Let's talk tonight," he said. I hung up, knowing I'd have to convince him, but I wasn't backing down. Later, I was weeding the backyard, picturing where the pool could go, when Clara, our neighbor, waved from her fence. She was in her 60s with a warm smile and a garden that bloomed year-round. "Heard about the pool drama," she said, leaning over. "Rachel's got no right treating your kids like that." I straightened, surprised. "You know about it?" I asked. She nodded. "My grandson got the same treatment last year. Banned for splashing too much." I stared, the shared hurt sparking something in me. "I'm thinking of building our own pool," I said, testing the words. "For the kids, for everyone." Clara's eyes lit up. "That's the spirit," she said. "Let me help. I can rally the neighborhood, maybe start a fundraiser." I blinked, caught off guard by her enthusiasm. "You do that?" I asked. She grinned. "Rachel doesn't own Summer Emily. Your kids deserve to swim." Her words were a balm, easing the sting of Diane's rejection. I thanked her, my mind racing with possibilities. Clara's support made the pool feel real, not just a desperate dream. That evening, I spread my notes across the kitchen table, sketching a pool design with a shallow end for Lucas and a deep end for Ava's cannonballs. I added a mural idea, waves and stars, a nod to my dad's love for the night sky. Nathan came home, his tie loosened, and sat across from me. He looked at the sketches, his brow furrowed. "This is a lot, Em," he said. "But I see how much it means to you." I reached for his hand, my voice steady. "It's not just for me," I said. "It's for us, for our family." He nodded, a small spark of agreement in his eyes, and I felt a fire kindling inside me, ready to burn through the pain. Nathan's nod wasn't a full yes, but it was enough to keep me going. I woke the next day with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. The kitchen table became my war room, covered in pool brochures and budget spreadsheets. I called Clara, who was already buzzing with ideas. She'd spoken to 3 neighbors, all eager to chip in for a community pool project. Their support felt like a lifeline, proof that Rachel's cruelty didn't define us. I hung up my hands steady, ready to make this real. I reached out to Tom, a local contractor Clara recommended. He came by that afternoon, a burly guy with a clipboard and a kind smile. I walked him through the backyard, pointing out where the pool would go, describing the mural of waves and stars. "This is for my kids," I said, my voice firm. "A place where they're free to be themselves." Tom nodded, jotting notes. "Sounds like more than a pool," he said. "Sounds like a legacy." His words hit deep, echoing my dad's note about building joy. Tom estimated the cost at $22,000, but he offered a discount if we used local materials. I thanked him, my mind racing through our savings. We'd have to dip into the emergency fund, maybe skip our annual camping trip. I pictured Ava's face at Diane's, the way she'd shrunk under Sophie's words. No vacation could outweigh giving her a place to shine. I shook Tom's hand, sealing the deal, and felt a weight lift, like I was finally fighting back. Clara swung by that evening with a stack of flyers for a neighborhood fundraiser. She'd designed them herself with a photo of kids splashing and the words "Papa's Place Pool Project." I stared at the name, my throat tight. "That's what Ava called it yesterday," I said when we were dreaming it up. Clara smiled. "Then it's perfect," she said. "Let's make it theirs." We planned a bake sale and a car wash, inviting every kid on the block to join. I felt a spark of pride, like I was building more than a pool, like I was building a community. The next day, I took Ava and Lucas to the library to research pool designs. Ava flipped through a book, pointing at a curved pool with a waterfall. "Can we have that?" She asked, her eyes bright for the first time in weeks. Lucas chimed in, asking for a dinosaur-shaped float. I laughed, jotting down their ideas, their excitement fueling me. We stopped for ice cream, and as they licked their cones, I asked what they'd want at the pool's opening party. Ava said, Music, Lucas said, balloons. I promised, both my heart swelling with their trust. At home, I found a text from Rachel, short and snappy. Heard you're building a pool. Good luck with that mess. I stared at the screen, her words like a jab, but they didn't cut like before. I didn't respond. Her opinion didn't matter anymore. I was doing this for my kids, for Clara's grandson, for every child Rachel had pushed away. I deleted the text and turned back to my sketches, adding a bench near the mural, a place to sit and remember my dad. Nathan came home late, his face tired but softer. He sat beside me looking at the flyers. You're really doing this, he said, a hint of awe in his voice. I nodded, showing him the budget. It's tight, I said, but it's worth it. He reached for my hand, his grip firm. I'm in M, he said. Let's make it happen. His support, small but real, felt like a brick in the foundation we were laying. By the weekend, the backyard was marked with spray paint outlining the pool's shape. I stood there watching the sunset, the orange light catching the grass. Clara's flyers were posted around town, and Tom's crew was set to start digging Monday. I thought of Lucas's sobs at Diane's Ava's silence and my own broken pleas. I wasn't that woman anymore, begging for scraps of acceptance. I was building something new, something mine. I knelt touching the marked earth and whispered a promise to my kids, to my dad, to myself. This would be our place, and no one could take it away. The backyard transformed over the next few weeks, the hum of Tom's crew filling our mornings. Dirt piles grew, then vanished, replaced by a smooth, concrete basin that gleamed under the July sun. Ava and Lucas pressed their hands into a wet corner of the foundation, their small prints, a quiet claim to this new space. I watched them, my chest tight with pride, but a knot of worry lingered. Rachel's text still echoed her disdain, a shadow I couldn't fully shake. What would she do when she saw this Clara's fundraiser was a hit? The bake sale at the park drew dozens of neighbors' kids running with cupcakes, parents dropping bills into our donation jar. By the end, we'd raised $3,000, enough to cover the mural and a few extras like pool floats. I thanked everyone, my voice catching, as I saw Ava hand out flyers, her smile wide. Clara squeezed my arm, whispering, "You're doing something special, Emily." I nodded, but my eyes kept scanning the crowd, half expecting Rachel to show up and spoil it. The pool was nearly done by mid-August, its tiles shimmering blue, the mural of waves and stars taking shape on the far wall. I spent evenings stringing fairy lights around the fence, picturing the opening party. We'd invited every kid on the block, plus a few from Ava's soccer team and Lucas's preschool. I wanted it to be loud, joyful, everything Rachel's pool wasn't. But late at night, alone in the kitchen, I'd stare at the budget, the numbers barely balancing. We'd drained our savings, and Nathan's overtime shifts were wearing him thin. Had I pushed too far? Then the trouble came. I got a call from the city office one morning, a board clerk saying someone had reported our pool for code violations. My stomach dropped. Missing permits, improper drainage. The list was long and technical. I drove to Tom's office, my hands shaking. He was calm, flipping through papers. "It's nonsense," he said. "Your permits are filed, drainage is standard. Someone's just stirring trouble." I knew who. Rachel. Her good luck with that mess text wasn't a jab. It was a warning. I confronted Clara over coffee, my voice low so the kids wouldn't hear. "Rachel's trying to shut us down," I said, showing her the clerk's email. Clara's face hardened. "She's scared," she said. "Your pool's not just a pool, Emily. It's proof she doesn't control you." I sipped my coffee, Clara's words sinking in. Rachel's lies, her rules, her perfect image, they were all about control. And now, I was slipping out of her grip, building something she couldn't touch. Tom cleared the violations in 2 days, proving every claim false, but the scare left me rattled. I stood by the pool that night, the water still and dark, the mural's stars catching the moonlight. I thought of my dad, how he'd faced his own battles, losing his job before I was born, yet still finding ways to make me smile. I wanted to be that strong, but Rachel's shadow loomed her reach longer than I'd expected. What else would she try? The opening party was set for Saturday, and I threw myself into planning, buying streamers and a playlist of Ava's favorite songs. But then Diane called, her voice hesitant. "Emily." "I heard about the pool," she said. "I'd like to come see it." I froze my hand on a roll of wrapping paper. Diane, who'd called me emotional, who'd sided with Rachel, wanted to come. I said she was welcome, my tone polite but guarded. I hung up, my heart racing. Her visit could change everything or break it all over again. The morning of the party, I woke to find Ava and Lucas decorating the pool gate with balloons, their laughter light and free. Neighbors started arriving, bringing trays of cookies and folding chairs. Clara's grandson Ethan ran up asking if he could swim first. I nodded, my eyes stinging. This was what I'd fought for. But as I set out the lemonade, I saw Diane's car pull up, her silver hair catching the sun. She stepped out, her face unreadable, and I felt the air shift like the world was holding its breath. Diane walked toward the pool, her step slow, her purse clutched tight. I set down the lemonade pitcher, wiping my hands on my jeans, and met her halfway. The backyard was alive with kids splashing, their laughter bouncing off the tiles, but her presence dulled the noise. She scanned the scene, her eyes lingering on the mural, the fairy lights, the crowd of neighbors. "This is quite something, Emily," she said, her voice careful, like she was choosing each word. I nodded, my throat dry. "Glad you could come," I said, gesturing to a chair. She didn't sit. Instead, she watched Ava dive for a pool ring, her expression unreadable. I waited, expecting her to say more, maybe acknowledge the work we'd put in, or the joy it brought. But she just stood there, her silence sharper than any critique. I felt Nathan's hand on my shoulder, a small anchor, but it wasn't enough to ease the tightness in my chest. Clara approached, balancing a tray of sandwiches, and greeted Diane warmly. "Your daughter-in-law's done a miracle here," she said, nodding toward the pool. Diane smiled thinly, murmuring something polite, but her eyes flicked to me, and I saw it, a glint of unease, maybe regret. She wasn't praising Rachel's perfect pool now. She was seeing mine filled with kids Rachel had banned, families she'd ignored. I wanted to ask if it changed anything, but the words wouldn't come. Then I noticed a car idling across the street, Rachel's sleek SUV, unmistakable with its polished rims. She didn't get out, just sat there, her silhouette rigid behind the tinted glass. My pulse quickened. She'd tried to sabotage us with that city complaint, and now she was here watching. I turned away, focusing on Lucas, who was showing Ethan how to float. But her presence lingered, a cold weight, like she was measuring every splash against her own rules. The party grew louder, kids racing to the slide, parents chatting over iced tea. I handed out towels, smiling, but my eyes kept drifting to Diane. She moved to the mural, tracing a painted star with her finger. "Your dad loved the water," she said, almost to herself. I froze, her mention of him catching me off guard. "Yeah," I said, my voice soft. "This is for him too." She nodded, but didn't meet my eyes, and the moment slipped away unfinished. Ava and Lucas ran up, dripping wet, begging to cut the ribbon we'd tied across the pool gate. "We called it Papa's place," Ava said to Diane, her voice proud. Lucas tugged her hand, pointing to their handprints in the concrete. Diane knelt, touching the prints, her face softening for the first time. "They're beautiful," she said, and I saw a crack in her armor, a hint of the grandma I'd once leaned on. But then she stood, brushing her hands, and the distance returned. I led the kids to the gate, handing Ava the scissors. The crowd cheered as she snipped the ribbon balloons bobbing in the breeze. I glanced at Rachel's car again, and this time I saw her face, pale and still, her eyes locked on the scene. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just stared like she was seeing her control unravel. I turned back to the kids, their joy a shield, but her gaze burned into me, a reminder of the fight I hadn't fully won. As the sun dipped low, Diane approached me again, her purse slung over her shoulder. "I should go," she said, her voice quiet. I nodded, searching her face for something, anything to bridge the gap. "Thanks for coming." I said my words flat. She hesitated, then spoke. "I didn't realize how much this meant to you," she said. "I'm sorry if I made it harder." Her apology was small, fragile, but it landed like a stone in my chest. I wanted to hug her to cry, but I just stood there, my arms heavy, as she walked away, leaving me with the echo of her words and the weight of what she hadn't said. The party faded into dusk, the last neighbors waving goodbye, their kids clutching soggy towels and leftover cookies. I stood by the pool, the fairy lights casting soft glows across the water, the mural's stars seeming to pulse in the quiet. Ava and Lucas were inside, sprawled on the couch, exhausted, but happy, their giggles still echoing in my mind. I breathed in the cool evening air, feeling the weight of the day settle, not heavy anymore, but steady, like a hand on my shoulder. I grabbed a trowel and knelt by the pool's edge, where I'd planned a small garden bed. I'd bought daisy seeds weeks ago, drawn to their simple white petals, the way they bloomed, no matter the soil. I dug into the earth, the dirt cool under my fingers, each scoop a small act of grounding. I thought of my dad, not his lake days, but his quiet evenings tending roses, whistling old songs. He'd said gardens were promises, proof you believed in tomorrow. I wanted that belief now for me, for my kids. Nathan stepped outside, his work boots soft on the grass. He sat on the pool's edge, watching me plant. "You okay?" he asked, his voice low, like he was afraid to break the moment. I nodded, pressing a seed into the soil. "Better than I've been," I said. "This place, it's ours." He didn't answer right away, just looked at the water, its surface catching the last of the sunset. "I used to think we didn't measure up," he said finally. "To Rachel, her house, her money." I looked up, surprised. He rarely opened up like this, his doubts usually buried under practical fixes. I set the trowel down, wiping my hands. "You never said that," I said, my voice gentle. He shrugged, his eyes on his boots. "Didn't know how," he said. "But seeing this pool, what you've done, I get it now. We're enough." His words landed soft, like the daisies I was planting, rooting something new between us. I reached for his hand, his calluses rough against my palm, and for the first time in months, I felt us as partners, not just parents navigating a storm. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and I pulled it out, expecting Clara or a neighbor. It was Rachel, a single line. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I stared at the screen, the words stark against the dim light. Part of me wanted to reply, to demand answers, to know if she meant it. But another part, the part that had carried Ava's tears and Lucas's fears, wasn't ready. I set the phone down, face up on the grass, and went back to planting. Rachel's apology could wait. This moment, this dirt, this quiet with Nathan, was mine. I thought of the party, how Ethan had laughed, how Clara's eyes shone when she saw the kids play. This pool wasn't just a rebellion against Rachel. It was a gift to my kids, to our street, to the parts of me I'd almost lost. I pressed another seed into the earth, picturing daisies swaying next summer, their roots deep. I wasn't the woman who'd begged at Diane's or the one who'd flinched at Rachel's texts. I was someone new, someone who could build, who could wait, who could choose. Nathan stood brushing grass from his jeans. "Let's get the kids to bed," he said, offering a hand. I took it, standing the trowel resting by the unfinished garden. The pool water lapped softly, a rhythm that felt like breathing. I looked at the mural, its waves curling under the stars, and felt my dad's presence, not in words, but in the calm that wrapped around me. I was ready to face Rachel, but not tonight. Tonight, I was whole. I tucked Ava and Lucas into bed, their faces soft with sleep, the day's joy still clinging to them. Ava's hand curled around a paper boat she'd made a party favor from a neighbor kid. Lucas mumbled something about stars, his dreams already pulling him under. I kissed their foreheads, lingering the warmth of their skin, grounding me. The house was quiet now. Nathan washing dishes downstairs, the clink of plates, a steady hum. I slipped into my room, needing a moment alone. I sat at my desk, the one cluttered with pool plans and grocery lists, and pulled out a notebook. I hadn't written to my dad since he passed, but tonight I felt him close, not in the pool's waves or the daisies, but in the stillness of this moment. Dear Dad, I wrote my pen slow. You taught me to build not just houses or gardens, but lives. I built a pool for Ava and Lucas, for us. Thank you for showing me how. I stopped, my eyes stinging, but it wasn't grief. It was gratitude, heavy and full for the strength he'd left in me. I set the pen down, my gaze drifting to Rachel's text, still unanswered on my phone. I read it again, her words small and sharp. "I'm sorry. Can we talk?" I pictured her at the party, pale in her car, watching the kids she'd pushed away. Part of me wanted to call to hear her out, to see if she'd changed. But I didn't need her apology to feel whole. I'd spent months chasing her approval, Diane's fairness, even Nathan's fight. Now I was enough, not because I'd won, but because I'd chosen my own path. I stood and walked to the window, the backyard dark, except for the pool's faint glow. The water was still reflecting a sliver of moon, and I thought of Ava's paper boat, how it floated so lightly. I didn't need to carry Rachel's weight anymore. I could let it go, not with anger, but with a quiet step forward. I'd meet her maybe when I was ready, but it would be on my terms, for my kids, not her guilt. Downstairs, Nathan was drying his hands, the kitchen clean. He looked at me, his eyes softer than they'd been in weeks. "Kids okay?" he asked. I nodded, leaning against the counter. "They're happy," I said. "That's what matters." He reached for me, pulling me into a hug, his arms steady. We stood there, the clock ticking above the stove, and I felt the pieces of us settling, not perfect, but real. I stepped outside one last time, the night air cool against my skin. The daisies weren't up yet, but I could see them in my mind, white and stubborn, blooming through cracks. I knelt by the garden bed, touching the soil, its grit a promise of growth. I didn't need Rachel's pool, Diane's approval, or even my own anger. I had this, my family, my choices. I stood the pool's light catching my shadow and walked back inside, my steps soft, my heart quiet, ready for whatever came next. A week after the party, I met Rachel at a park near our house, the one with the creaky swings and a pond where ducks floated lazily. I'd agreed to talk, but I wasn't chasing peace anymore. I was offering it on my terms. The air was crisp, early fall, brushing the trees with gold. I sat on a bench, my hands in my jacket pockets, watching Rachel approach her steps, hesitant, her usual polish dulled. She sat beside me, leaving a careful space between us. "I'm sorry, Emily," she said, her voice low, almost swallowed by the breeze. I didn't mean for things to get so bad. I looked at her, searching for the girl I'd known, the one who'd raced me to the lake's edge. Her eyes were tired, her guard down, and for the first time, I saw cracks in her perfect shell. "Why did you do it?" I asked, my tone even. "Why push my kids away?" She fiddled with her scarf, her fingers nervous. "I don't know," she said. "I think I was jealous. Your life, it's so easy, so full. You've got Nathan, this kids, this warmth. I'm always trying to keep everything together, and I just snapped." Her words caught me off guard, not because they excused her, but because they were raw human. I'd never seen her vulnerable, never thought she could envy my messy, ordinary days. I leaned back the bench, cool against my spine. "It wasn't easy, Rachel," I said. "You made it harder. You hurt Ava and Lucas and me." She nodded, her eyes on the pond. "I know," she said. "I don't know how to fix it. I didn't expect her to. I wasn't here to mend her guilt. I was here to close a door." "You can start by respecting my kids," I said. "If you want to be family, that's the line." She looked at me, her face soft, and nodded. "I'll try," she said, and I believed she meant it for now. We parted without hugs, just a quiet goodbye, the ducks quacking in the distance. I walked home, my boots crunching leaves, feeling lighter, not because we were fixed, but because I'd spoken my truth. The park faded behind me, and I thought of the pool, how it had become more than a rebellion. It was a home, a place where Ava braided her friend's hair, where Lucas chased fireflies at dusk. I'd built it for them, but it had rebuilt me too. Back home, I started a new routine, waking early to jog around the block, the morning mist cool on my skin. I'd never been a runner, but the rhythm of my steps, the steady thump of my heart felt like a conversation with myself. I'd pass the pool, its water calm, and think of the kids who'd come to swim, their parents who'd lingered to chat. Clara's grandson Ethan had started a weekly game of water tag, his shy smile now a grin. I'd wave to neighbors, their nods a quiet thank you for the space we'd made. Nathan noticed the change, teasing me about my sneakers. But he joined me sometimes, our breaths sinking in the dawn. We'd talk about small things, school projects, his work. But it was the silence between words that mattered, the ease we'd found again. I'd cook dinner with Ava, letting her stir the sauce, her chatter filling the kitchen. Lucas would draw at the table, his crayons scratching out wild shapes. These moments weren't grand, but they were ours, woven tight, unbreakable. I stopped checking my phone for Rachel's texts, stopped bracing for Diane's calls. Diane had come by once bringing a pie, her eyes softer than before. We didn't talk about the fight, just sat by the pool watching Lucas splash. She'd left with a hug, and I felt a thread of our old bond, fragile but there. I didn't need more. I'd learned to hold my own space, to let love in without begging for it. As September settled, I sat on the porch one evening, a mug of tea warming my hands, the pool's lights flickering in the dark. The neighborhood was quiet, kids in bed, the world slowing. I thought of the summer, the hurt, the fight, and how I'd come through not whole, but stronger. I wasn't the woman who'd stood shaking at Diane's, or the one who'd flinched at Rachel's words. I was Emily, 32, a mom, a builder, a woman who'd found her ground. October brought cooler evenings, the kind where you pull on a sweater and feel the world soften. I started hosting a weekly potluck by the pool, nothing fancy. Just neighbors bringing casseroles and folding chairs. We'd eat under the fairy lights, kids chasing each other on the grass, their laughter mingling with the clink of forks. I'd watch Clara share stories with new faces, Ethan teaching Lucas how to skip stones across the water. This wasn't just my backyard anymore. It was a gathering place, a thread tying us together. One Sunday, we held the first Papa's Place Festival, a name the kids insisted on. I'd spent days planning hanging paper lanterns, setting up a table for face painting. Ava helped paint a banner, her brush careful, her smile quiet but sure. Lucas ran around handing out glow sticks, his energy boundless. The street came alive, families spilling in music humming from a borrowed speaker. I stood back, leaning against the pool fence, taking it in. This was what I'd built not to prove Rachel wrong, but to prove I could. Diane came her presence a surprise. She brought a quilt she'd sewn blue and white like the pool's tiles. She draped it over a chair, her hands lingering on the stitches. For the kids, she said, her voice soft. I nodded, thanking her, and we watched the festival unfold, no need for heavy words. Rachel didn't come, but I heard she'd asked Clara about it, her questions cautious, like she was testing the water. I didn't mind. Her absence didn't dim the light here. As the festival wound down, Ethan's mom pulled me aside, her eyes bright. You change things, Emily, she said. Ethan's been happier since he started coming here. He feels like he belongs. I swallowed her words, settling deep. I thought of my own childhood, how my dad's small gestures, a fishing trip, a bedtime story, had made me feel seen. I'd given that to Ethan, to Ava, to Lucas, to kids I barely knew. It wasn't grand, but it was enough. That night, after everyone left, I cleaned up alone, stacking plates, folding blankets. The pool was dark, its surface still reflecting a scattering of stars. I sat on the bench I'd built, the one facing the mural, and let my mind wander. I'd spent so long fighting Rachel's rejection, Diane's silence, my own doubts. But somewhere along the way, I'd stopped needing their validation. I'd learned to hold my own worth, to see my kids' joy as my compass. Family wasn't just blood. It was the people who showed up, who laughed, who stayed. The lesson wasn't about winning or proving a point. It was about choosing myself over and over, even when it hurt. I'd built a pool, yes, but more than that, I'd built a life where my kids could thrive, where I could stand tall. I thought of Rachel, her jealousy, her struggle to keep control. I didn't hate her anymore. I saw her flawed and human, and I let her go, not with anger, but with a quiet wish for her to find her own peace. I stood the night air, brushing my skin, and walked to the pool's edge. I dipped my hand in the water, cold, rippling under my fingers. This was my place, my family's place, and no one could take it away. I smiled, small and private, and headed inside the stars above, steady the world at rest. I'd love to hear from you. What's a moment when you had to rebuild after someone broke your trust? Share it below. It means the world to connect with you. If this story touched you, please like, subscribe, or share it with someone who needs it. Thank you for listening, for being here. Here's to finding our own light, one step at a time.